Welcome everyone to our Fashion Means Business fashion talk. It was with great pleasure that I introduce Sian, Nicholas and Luke, who are joining us today to discuss a plastic-free fashion. How can we reduce plastic usage in fashion? So Sian Sutherland is a serial entrepreneur with a varied background in advertising, Michelin star restaurants, film production, brand creation, design agencies. And working across many industries, Sian soon realized that we were relying too much on plastic. And in 2016, Sian co-founded A Plastic Planet, a global campaign organization with a single goal: to ignite and inspire the world to turn off the plastic tap. Nicola Rocha, born and raised in Switzerland, thank you for joining us today from Switzerland, is an explorer turned entrepreneur, having also worked across many industries. In 2004, he purchased Swedish sportswear brand Mover and has invested in research and development, gradually replacing synthetic fibers by natural alternatives over the past 15 years. The result is a ski product line offering high performance and durability on the slopes. Now, Nicholas has set out again on a new venture, building upon his developments in ski wear, and has founded Mover Plastic-Free Sportswear, which launched in October 2021. And then last but not least, Dr. Luke Haverhals, who is a PhD chemist and materials scientist, known for developing new materials from abundant natural nutrient inputs. Luke was a chemistry professor at the US Naval Academy and at Bradley University prior to founding Natural Fiber Welding Incorporation. Luke believes that humanity is better served by leveraging plants for a wide variety of applications, ranging from textiles and leather-like materials to packaging and building materials. So thank you to the three of you for joining us today. And thank you for outlining the devastating effects of plastic usage in the fashion industry and sharing ways that we can reduce plastic consumption. So I'm going to hand over to you, Sian. Thank you all very much for joining us today. We will have questions at the end, so please, if you do have any questions, there'll be plenty of opportunity at the end of the talk to ask.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Hannah. Thank you for that introduction. I'm going to whistle through a few slides. Lovely to be with you all online. I want to whistle through a few slides really just to set the scene for why should we be concerned about plastic in general, let alone within fashion. So I'm going to cover some of these 6 important words. There's a huge amount of myths around plastic, so I want to burst some of those little mythical bubbles. I want to talk a little bit about risk and responsibility, whose job is it, legacy and opportunity, and majorly, I want to focus on hope, because we have to have hope, particularly in these times when we're all looking at this Armageddon of 8 years and 2030 and what lies ahead of us with the climate crisis. But the people who are really going to talk about hope are going to be Nicholas and Luke, who will follow me, because these are the guys who are actually doing things and not just talking about stuff. So the first bubble that I wanted to burst is this myth that the plastic crisis is not connected with the climate crisis, when of course they are intrinsically connected. And I have the firm belief that actually plastic and the fact we've gone down this wrong cul-de-sac in our misuse of this incredible but toxic and indestructible material is that little tap on the shoulder for us as humanity. It is the canary in the coal mine of alerting us of where we have gone wrong and therefore resulting in the climate crisis. The massive amount of emissions that we are seeing that are going to escalate, so that in fact, the plastics industry will soon emit more greenhouse gases than the entire coal industry. Huge amount of chat at COP26 about coal, zero chat about plastic. How can this be possible? Because if plastic industry was actually a country, it is actually the 5th biggest emitter of greenhouse gases. So the fact that it wasn't slap bang in the middle of the agenda at COP26, we should all ask ourselves why. very effective lobbying by the fossil fuel industry. But more than that, the thing that strikes me has always been what was really the cause of the climate crisis is, of course, these coal-fired production factories that are pumping out all this stuff in places like China. And what was the one material that enabled us to ramp up to these giddy levels of hyperconsumption that we see right now, that enabled us to use something just once, enabled us to make something so cheaply, so easily, so conveniently that we could consider it single use? And that material, of course, is plastic. So that's another reason why plastic and the climate crisis are so intrinsically connected. And it's about to get worse. You would imagine, with all the press, particularly in the UK, everything since Blue Planet 2, everything that we hear in the papers every day, from the Daily Mail all the way through to David Attenborough, you would imagine that things are about to get better, that perhaps there was a tapering off of demand. But no, plastic is actually about to treble. So running up to 2040, we will see a massive amount of new plastic. Just in the US alone, there are already, since 2019, 42 new plastics facilities that are currently being commissioned. And there's an invisibility to plastic. I'm sitting in a little office here. There is plastic in the paint on the walls. There's plastic everywhere, of course, in my keyboard. And we focus a lot on packaging. 40% of all plastic is currently used for packaging. In itself, an ephemeral thing, a thing that we're never even buying. We buy the thing inside the packaging. So 40% is used for packaging. And this is where we feel the plastic guilt, because we see it. But what about the rest of this invisible plastic that we don't see? So this just shows us where that 60% is. And of course, in fashion, plastic has been secretly hiding for many decades now. And the facts on plastic and fashion are getting far worse. The fossil fuel industry is already starting to divert its attention of future growth from being in energy, because we all know that there will be a decline in demand for energy, and they are diverting it into plastics. And that will mean packaging and everything that we see, but it will also mean they will double down, if not treble down, on the use of plastic within textiles. This is where we need to be very careful. Already, plastic is 70% of all textiles. We used to say 60%, the new numbers are 70%. So what is this doing to us as humans, this addiction to this toxic and indestructible material? So one of the things that we're involved in at A Plastic Planet is the Plastic Health Coalition. And the news is not good. As you can imagine, this toxic, indestructible material that we inhale every time we breathe in, that it's in our air, it's in every glass of water, every glass of beer that we drink, it's in our entire food system. Can we really afford to treble production and everything that we know goes along with that, and all these chemicals that we use, up to 8,000 different chemicals, when we know that actually we're now finding plastic and the toxins within our blood, within the placenta? We're finding it with the unborn babies. And now we see that there is twice as much plastic in a baby poop as there is in an adult poop. How can this possibly be good for us? So then I move on to risk and responsibility. So whose job is it? Who should be stepping up to fix this, rather than squeezing every last drop of profit out of the status quo? And we don't see plastic as being something that is a litter problem, a pollution problem. We've always been focusing on the wrong end of the pipe. And this is because the fossil fuel industry want us to focus on that wrong end of the pipe so that they can continue to pump it out at the beginning. So this is a design problem. This is a misuse of an incredible material that we're using for things that we don't need to last for 500 to 1,000 years. So it's a production problem. So as an entrepreneur, I always like to simplify things down. And I look at this, what I'm always calling, what's the burden of responsibility? And I flip that into what's the burger of responsibility? And you've got us, the shopping public. Is it our job? Are we all meant to become this mythical thing called the ethical consumer? Are we the ones that have to vote with our wallets now and search out the right thing? Is it our responsibility? Is it government's responsibility? Do we need new fiscal policies? Do we need taxation and laws? Do we need to actually legislate much more heavily on this with things like the plastic tax? Or is it industry? And for me, that juicy burger in the middle of the bun is the interesting bit, because industry is the tool of change. And this is where, as people within the fashion industry, as designers, as future entrepreneurs, this is where your power lies. It's not the public. We simply buy what we're sold. It is government's job, but it's government's job to bring those laws into play so that industry can accelerate change. They just need to mandate. We live in a world right now where there is not an industry, including fashion, where there isn't some kind of pact or promise or pledge or commitment on plastic. And the sad news is, if you read the Breaking the Plastic Wave report that came out last year, the truth of the matter is that even if all these pacts and pledges, all these commitments, including the single-use plastic pact from the EU, everything we're doing in the UK and beyond, if they were all successful, we would see a maximum of 7% reduction in that trebling of plastic production. We'd see a maximum of 7% reduction by 2040 of plastic flowing into the oceans, into the air, into our soil. So 5 years ago now, myself and my co-founder, Frederica Magnusson, co-founded an organization called The Plastic Planet to see, could we use our business experience to create a different kind of organization with this very simple goal, to ignite and inspire the world to turn off the plastic tap, not to get waylaid by conversations about could we potentially increase from the global 9% of plastic recycling, but could we actually accelerate through working with businesses a different kind of organization. And so we want to always focus on solutions. You will rarely find us speaking at ocean summits. We don't believe in this whole model of finger pointing, making people feel bad about what they're doing. We have to move away from these things because those things stultify us. They stop us making change. And as entrepreneurs, we absolutely know wherever there is change in any business, there is always opportunity. So I'll just share with you a couple of examples of our work over the last 5 years. And what I love about these is that they both demonstrate the power of design, the power of innovation, the power of, if we realize that we cannot use plastic going forward, what our future can look like. And it doesn't have to look knitted armpit, hairy sandal. It doesn't need to look like something that's about denial. It can look like something as beautiful as this. So this is the Dove refillable deodorant that was launched in the US in February this year. And I love what an example this is of how great design can elevate sustainability to something that is beautiful, aspirational. I want it. And then it happens to be better for the planet. It's the most successful launch that Dove, biggest skincare brand in the world, have ever done. And the great news is it's also the adoption and the repurchase of the refillables is 3 times the number that they ever forecast. So this is an example of how good design can change consumer behavior. Kraft Heinz, we're working with them. Some of you may have seen some news at the weekend where sachets are now being considered in the UK government as part of a nationwide ban. Why do we still have these trillion global plastic sachets pumped out? So we're working with Kraft Heinz on how we can replace this iconic little sachet for tomato ketchup. And trust me, if we can package this delicious but toxic substance, tomato ketchup, we can repackage anything. And then we move into things like, the need for us to dramatically reduce our addiction to fossil fuels with plastic-free fashion. So we launched a campaign on the 1st of July this year, and we didn't want to even call it a campaign. We wanted to work with the fashion industry and say, don't be a victim, own this campaign so that you can then drag the rest of the industry forward, create plastic-free fashion collections. And I'm disappointed to tell you that the result from the majority of the fashion industry was, for me, the realization they're so not ready to hear this conversation. They just want to talk about the poly bag. Maybe we could do something about this infamous poly bag that t-shirts in their whole supply chain are still using 10 of. They're not ready to talk about the fact that, to be honest, BP, Shell, all of the, Aramco, they might as well go and buy H&M tomorrow because that's going to be their route to market as we see this increase of plastic polymers. These are the weasel words. Be careful of these. Recyclable. What does that even mean? Zero responsibility for actually recycling it. Oh, but I made it, Coca-Cola, 120 billion plastic bottles every single year. But we've made it out of recyclable material. It's not our fault that there isn't a waste management system to deal with it. Be really conscious of that word. It means nothing. Recycle plastic. And then what? Back in the bin, back in the container ship, going off to some developing country or off to Turkey, off to Ghana, to add to the 15 million tons of fashion that we send them every single week, a large chunk of which is deemed waste immediately. Recycling plastic is not the answer. You downcycle plastic. So do not be fooled. Making a fleece out of recycled PET bottles is never the answer. Ocean plastic, massively emotive concept, shouldn't exist. Don't honor it by making things out of ocean plastic. Don't even go there with the Adidas ocean plastic shoe. Single-use plastic. This again is one of those little phrases that we think, well, that means a straw. Maybe if I wear a jumper more than 5 times, it's no longer single use. Remember, it lasts for centuries. So single use means if it's never going to be recycled into another thing, it's probably single use. So recycling, I love this phrase. Recycling is the big leaf of consumerism. It's that little guilt appeaser for us to carry on with the habits that we have now considered quite normal. It's not normal. The 6 billion tons of waste that we create every single year isn't normal. And it struck me recently to really look at what is this word consumer that we all use. And as you get into business and industry, you will find that you use that phrase every single day. We talk about ourselves as consumers. And actually, when you go back, you can unpick the etymology of this word. And it means, it's a 15th century word that means to squander or to waste, which kind of says everything to me. When actually what we want is to be citizens, we want to contribute, and we want to belong. There's a big report coming out next month. Keep an eye out for that, which I believe is going to be a bonfire of certifications. When you're working in textiles, be very conscious of a lot of the myths and a lot of the, the paper thin, the certifications right now, I really believe they do not mean anything. If you go back through the paper trail, they are people who are certifying other people paying for the certification bodies. It doesn't make any sense. And that is something that we really need to unpack and make sure that certifications stand for something. Right now, they don't. Let's look at hope. Let's look at opportunity. Here we live in a world now where the R's are no longer about recycling. They're about resell. I love these new platforms that are evolving of reselling things. Obviously this whole concept of reloving our garments, repairing. I think we're about to see a massive explosion of craftsmanship. We're talking about fashion. Fashion used to be about craft. It used to be about beauty. And it really upsets me now. It's about throwaway. It's about human rights. It's completely displaced from where it should originally be. And then this whole concept of rental, which is great, but we need to be careful that rental isn't actually just also about seasonality. Who wants to rent something that is 4 seasons old? If that isn't working, then it can't be the way that the fashion industry excuse themselves. These are a lot of the exciting things that I see coming forward. And I know Luke is going to be talking about how can we really use the materials that nature gives us with abundance. How can we use plant proteins? How can we use all these new biomaterials and give them back to nature in a way that she knows how to handle? How can we actually be working with nature in true circularity? We're about to see whole new economic models, and it's going to happen very fast, where we talk about thriving rather than this constant unsustainable growth in GDP. We're going to be looking at products and packaging of permanence, the whole refill model, which is going to be used in the world of consumer goods. We're going to see the whole reinvention of refill, buying better, sharing more, repairing more, buying less. This is not about an economy tanking, though. This is about massive opportunity. So I think we're entering this incredible materials revolution and radical systems change. It won't be about just swapping one material for another. Plastic's bad, let's use something else. It's an entire systemic change that we are seeing right now. But a lot of the people that I talk to, particularly within big business, they are right now all playing golf in Oregon. And this is an extraordinary real life photograph of where we are. And when you go to things like the Plastic Health Summit and you realize that industry don't want to hear the impact on human health, they just just let me carry on with doing what I'm doing right now because it's too big, I'm too overwhelmed. So we're just playing golf in Oregon. And I love this quote from Elise Boulding: if one is mentally out of breath from focusing on the present, there is no energy left for reimagining the future. And the next generation, the students of the world, you guys who are listening to this now, you are the hope for the future because you still have that mental capacity to reimagine something that is bright and fair and equal. Don't get stuck playing golf in Oregon. So we know that it's time now to stop pursuing these solutions that allow us to see people just treading water, waiting for somebody to reinvent a new kind of plastic. We have to spend all our time envisaging this bright, different future that we can then all accelerate towards. It's going to be an entire revolution, and it will be what your legacy will be. You're going to witness so much change in your lifetime. And when we think about legacy, for me, a big part of my motivation now as an entrepreneur, massive plastic sinner, massive part of the problem is this, that it's not just about my sons. It's not even about my son's sons. What we do in the next 8 years is going to impact that massive blue circle, which is all the unborn generations to come. So how can we extend our circle of care? How can we extend our legacy to those trillions? Because what we do right now, these are the generations that we're going to be impacting. And now it gives me great pleasure to introduce Nicola Rocha from Mover, who is one of the few people that I have met in this entire journey of a plastic planet, who is out there making change happen and doing it for real. Thank you. Over to you, Nicola.
Thank you, Sian. Thank you very much for this very nice introduction. I think there's a super important thing you have to understand. I come from the sportswear world, which is not fashion. But sportswear, when it comes to plastic, is even much worse than fashion. Fashion is, as you said, Sian, is 70% of plastic. In sportswear, is 99.9% is plastic made. And we addressed that by coincidence, and I will tell you this story. But before I start, I would like to come back on one word which you used, Sian, which was so important. It is the recycling word, which is the word massively used by the entire textile industry to give hope to the planet. I've been assisting the Copenhagen Fashion Summit in 2017, 2018, 2019. I met 1,000 chief sustainability officers, and they were all sharing this beautiful idea that we had to turn this linear economy into a circular economy and recycle more plastic to do more plastic. The problem is not that much how it ends on the landfills. It's how it leaks and what it releases during this second life is exactly the same toxics as fresh plastic. And people don't understand that for some reason. They think it is better than nothing to recycle, and I think it is not. I will share my screen now to show you a 2-minute little movie that was actually published in 2017 and provoked what we have now developed with Mover. So please watch the movie.
Sweaty smelling dress shirts? That's what polyester used to be. These days, everybody wears it. Yoga pants, fleeces, even synthetic fabrics. Yes, polyester means the stuff used to make polyester. But you don't have to use new stuff to make it. Some companies are making polyester out of old stuff. Plastic bottles are that. Every day we work.
Nicholas, I don't know if you could turn the volume up at all or maybe talk over it. Is that okay? Just because we can't hear. Thank you.
Sorry, what did you say?
Whether you could maybe
Volume up.
Talk over it or turn the volume up because
You can't hear it.
no, we can't hear it.
That's a pity.
Pictures, but yeah.
You don't have the sound. You need the sound, else I will skip it. Lane, can you help for the volume? I don't think so.
Nicola, you can hear it very faintly. You just need to turn it up if you can.
No, it is up. It's all the way up.
Oh, I see.
So I guess there is another problem. So never mind. I will not.
Maybe you could summarize what it's trying to
Maybe.
tell us.
Wait. I'll try something. I just try to take my headphones away. If this is better, just make me a sign.
What do you think when you hear the word polyester? 70s leisure suits? Sweaty smelling dress shirts? That's what polyester used to be. These days, everybody wears it. Yoga pants, fleeces, even underwear, all made from synthetic fabrics like polyester. More polyester means more demand for the stuff used to make polyester. But you don't have to use new stuff to make it. Some companies are making polyester out of old stuff, plastic bottles, in fact. Every day, the world throws away billions and billions of plastic bottles. That's a problem. Of course, the real solution is that we all use less plastic. But it's cool that even while we work to reduce plastic, some companies are turning trash into stuff we actually like. Drink it, drop it in the bin, take it to a recycling factory, chop it up, weave it, wear it, wash it, wear it again, wash it again. Seems like a great solution, right? But darn, when we look closer, there are some real problems with this. The big problem is that some people might be encouraged to use more disposable plastic if they think it's being recycled safely. But there's also a little problem, a micro problem that's adding up to one big mess. Every time we wash synthetic fabrics, whether they're made from recycled bottles or brand new materials, super tiny pieces of plastic called microfibers wash off and flow down the drain, up to hundreds of thousands each wash. The older our clothes get, the worse the problem can become. Yikes! These fibers are so tiny, water treatment plants don't catch them all, so they wind up in rivers, lakes, and even the ocean. When they reach the ocean, they act like sponges, sucking up other pollutants around them. They're like little toxic bombs full of motor oil, pesticides, and industrial chemicals that end up in the bellies of fish and eventually in the bellies of us. It's gross. It's already estimated there are 1.4 million trillion in our oceans. That's like 200 million microfibers for every person on the planet. These are some serious downsides to what looked like a good solution. Time for these creative companies to go back to the drawing board. Because while we can wash our clothes less or avoid buying synthetic clothing, we can't solve the problem without them. And if we want these companies to make it a top priority, they need to hear from you. Let's find a real solution to make our clothes safe for the environment, safe for the ocean, and safe for us.
Okay, this was the story of stuff, 2017, 5 years ago. And the people assisting to this Copenhagen Fashion Summit was carrying H&M, Nike, Pandora, all the big names, and they continue pretending the same thing and not addressing the issue of plastic pollution. So basically, what is interesting with Mover is that we come from a technical ski gear background. We have been doing Gore-Tex ski jackets and trousers since the company since '82. I took over in 2004, and not because of sustainable ecological reasons. I introduced natural fibers in the ski wear, first for the first layers. This was nothing new. Icebreaker was on the market already, using merino wool from New Zealand that is beautiful in the mountain. So we skipped the polyamide polyester in 2007, I think, to replace it. Then we developed a beautiful wool wadding insulation that wasn't existing on the market. It's called Swiss wool. It was called Swiss wool. Now it's available for every brand. This was the first to market insulation made out of wool. Here you see that we use alpaca wool from the Swiss alpacas. It's a fleece. It is super soft. It's super light. It's super warm. The reason to introduce that instead of the polyester we had been using until then was that we were frustrated by the polyester reaction to activity, to body activity, because as soon as you heat up the polyester, the plastic gives heat back much quicker, and you heat up and you sweat much quicker. In the mountain, the worst is to get too warm. You try to get to stay chill, to stay cool. And for that reason, we're looking for something better than polyester. Down was not a possibility neither, because you have to insulate down in downproof bags because they migrate through everything. So the downproof bags by definition are not breathable neither. And we were looking for something both breathable, light and warm that could take us further in the sport activity. And that's how we came to the Swiss wool insulation. Within the years, we had this beautiful wool system for the first, second layer. And we realized that the outer layer, the shell, the Gore-Tex shell, was actually the shield that was impeaching the true breathability of our beautiful system. So we looked for alternative to this Gore-Tex. We were Gore-Tex licensees, so we were very happy with that. Commercially, it was working fine. And we found a very old British patented fabric called Ventile, which was developed in the 40s for the British Army, I think, for the UK Army, which is this high densely woven cotton. It's a pure cotton fabric, but so dense that it is wind and water resistant to a certain extent to water, but completely windproof. And we applied that to ski wear, and it worked beautifully well, because basically for the first time we could breathe through all our layers. So we were warm from inside, we didn't get wet, and we could go further both in altitude, further down, further in the effort, and further in the temperature range, be it to the cold or to the warm side. We thought this was beautiful, and that was 2017 when we started hearing about the plastic problem. And then we thought, well, we had made all this development, all this effort for better performance, but the real problem behind all that is the plastic. So why don't we go for a new plastic-free proposal on the market? We searched around and nothing was basically existing for sportswear. The best players, Smart Wool, Icebreaker, doing just first layers out of merino wool, they add 15% nylon in their garments, pretendingly to make it more resistant. The real reason, it is 10% cheaper at production. So there is no reason to add nylon in merino wool, because merino wool works for a century possibly. I don't know, I have a merino wool t-shirt I wore now for 15 years in a row. I washed it 700 times. It works, it is as if it would be new. So we developed this new collection. I'll let you check it on our website, mover.eu. On the screenshots behind me, you see a few pieces of the collection. What is really nice, we moved out of the ski wear that was a little too difficult to explain to the consumer, and to niche. This is our first outdoor collection. It will be followed by other sports. We'll be happy to go to tennis, to golf. We could go up to the point we go to sailing, because this would be the ultimate test for our concept, to see if the water resistance is enough. For sure, we have the comfort, the breathability. And once people go to these natural fabric, very often they do not come back. What is interesting, you will discover on our website, is also the variety of materials, of structures, because we don't just have jersey or flannel or fleece. We have 100% fleece. This is the inside of my, oops, it disappears on the screen. It's the inside of my jacket. This is a 100% fleece fabric made out of 100% wool. It's extremely light. It's just as light as polyamide. It's just much more comfortable to wear. And then we have piquets. We can give any structure to natural fabrics, and we'll work not only with wool and cotton, but also with silk, with hemp, with linen, with everything nature has to offer. And basically it took 4 billion years to develop, and I wonder if we can really make it better than what nature had to offer us. And this is my link to Luke, because you are the scientist, so maybe you tell us if you can overcome nature. Luke, this is to you.
So I would say we don't need to overcome nature, we need to work with it, and sometimes give natural things a few new tools in its tool chest. So I'm going to show you, well, actually, let me just say, That's a really great setup, Nicholas. So I think it's worth mentioning why we have so much plastic. So why we have so much plastic isn't because people really like where it comes from. People don't like where it goes to, all the consequences of it. And yet plastic does one thing unbelievably well, which is that you can mold it and shape it into about anything. So when I was a professor at the US Naval Academy, one of the things I started working on first as just a simple academic chemistry professor was, what if you could allow natural things to be moldable and shapeable in ways like plastic? That would completely destroy the need to use plastic in so many different applications. So I'll say, we all kind of do it, all of us. I'll get to the punchline in a little bit, but I'll suggest to you that the answer about how you mold and shape natural materials is not that far away from your everyday life. In fact, it's part of your everyday life all the time. So let me share my screen. Y'all see slides. All right, so first let's go back just real quick. We had a wonderful setup here about plastics. I'll just point out this with a few pictures, that the issue with like the carbon footprint of plastics is not that the carbon in plastics comes from oil. I mean, that's true. But what people don't realize is when you want to run unbelievably expensive and complicated refinery systems, it requires lots of heat. You actually have to burn a lot of natural gas. You have to burn a lot of oil to drive the chemical processes that take fossil carbon and turn it into plastic. And so we do a lot of this in this world today. And what's really scary is we have all these consequences of plastic that were just discussed. And yet only about 1/5 of the world's population actually gets to buy new fancy stuff. If you consider all the people in Africa, Central America, South America, Asia, there's all kinds of people. In fact, the majority of the world's population doesn't get to buy fresh virgin plastic. So, and we could all say, well, I don't know, that's both good and bad, right? Because I don't know, there's a lot of people that want to live like the rest of us and live well with, and then I'll say there's a lot of conflict, therefore, around where we're getting the energy and the carbon itself. And then I'll say, everyone knows about this problem, so then there's people trying to solve it. Here's a suggestion of how some people think it should be solved. And I'll say it's also incorrect, because you have people not really understanding. It's that people say, well, we should just genetic engineer creatures to solve the problem. We'll grow yeast in a fermentation vat, and that can grow spider silk or something. And the problem is, scientifically, it doesn't work. Or I'll say from an economics perspective, it doesn't work. Moreover, when you scale up, even if you could program a cell like a computer, then you have to run it in this technology here. So it's a fermentation vat, or you have to grow a mushroom in a special way or something like that. And the problem is, it doesn't compete with the existing production system I just showed you. Moreover, it takes incredible amounts of energy to do this for the amount of productivity that you see here. And so then you end up with startup companies around this world that are making false carbon claims about, and then basically what they're doing is they claim that they get their waste methane from a coal mine in order to grab carbon credits for themselves. And anyway, don't tell the truth about the fact that actually there is a carbon footprint with the biotech materials, and they don't scale, they're too cost effective. So what I'm going to show you is a simpler approach and way to go forward. And one that actually performs too. I mean, that's the other thing about the biotech materials. There's some companies that keep trotting out the same purse on different runways all over Earth. And these companies have raised hundreds of millions of dollars and do not have very much to show for it. Okay, so I'm going to show you how to make things from what you see on the left, regenerative ecosystems, instead of what you see on the right. And here's a stat. So I grew up on a farm in Iowa. And one of the things that grew up learning about was just how productive is photosynthesis. And we'll note, by the way, that not everything in agriculture is right, but agriculture is based on something that is profoundly different than the petrochemical industry, which is called photosynthesis, which we learn about in grade school. But more new plant matter will grow in one day on Earth, one day, than the combined tonnage of plastics produced by people in years. One day of photosynthesis beats years of the existing hundreds of trillions of dollars invested in the CapEx and OpEx of the petrochemical industry. Okay, so what if you could tap into that? All right, so here's the answer. We do it all the time. It's called baking. So the best chemist I still know is my mother, and my mother knows how to take all natural ingredients and using different mixing techniques and different ways to cook. So frying pans and panini presses and waffle irons and ovens, knows how to make not just different dishes, but really different materials if you stop and think about it. And nature is already abundant with these natural materials, including all the different byproducts you get when you grow your food. So I'll show you some pictures of the things that we use. So we don't use eggs and sugar and flour necessarily. We use coconut fiber and waste cotton and hemp and natural elastomers and vegetable oils and things like that. So that's we would trade out that. And then of course we use very different equipment. I don't have time to show you the technologies today, but what we've discovered is a whole bunch of ways that are very simple and very tunable to make high performance materials in ways that are more like baking, where the energy requirement to drive the chemistry is vanishingly small, which fundamentally solves the carbon footprint problem and then keeps these materials. Now these materials are made from nutrients. When you can make materials and products from nutrients, now I can show you a leather-like material that is plants, not plastic. I can show you a different kind of a dish, if you will. Here's a foam. It's all plants, not plastic. Here's the world's first recyclable shoe sole. It's all plants, not plastic, which means I can hold up the whole shoe. It's made of nutrients that can go back to planet Earth and do another cycle, or we figured out ways to even recycle these materials back into themselves. I'm wearing a shirt today that I can't wait someday to talk to Nicholas more about. It breathes more than a Nike Dry Fit, and it moves moisture and actually cools your skin more than polyester. Nicholas did a really great job of explaining how polyester tends to hold on to heat. When you're in the gym, that's actually preventing some of your performance. But what you don't like about cotton today is it sucks up too much water. So we're working with Ralph Lauren and a whole bunch of other brands on how you make something much, much better than plastic could ever be. And then here's one of my pairs of shoes that is made with recycled cotton. It's unheard of performance of a canvas material that's not just cotton. It's not virgin cotton. In this case, this shoe is 50% recycled, which is unheard of performance. Okay, so there's, as you might imagine, if you can do all these things that I'm claiming, then you would have a lot of customers, and it's true, NFW has a lot of customers in our pipeline. 700 brands on planet Earth want to work with us, and here's some of them, so you can read about what we're doing with Allbirds and BMW and Ralph Lauren, etc. Okay, and since I've got a captive audience here, I'll say, and some of you should consider working for Natural Fiber Welding. We're getting some awards and taking on resources to hire lots of people, and I hope that amongst you are some people that think that devoting your professional life to the mission of plants instead of plastic is something that you would consider. We'd love to talk. Here's our pantry. So cotton gets a lot of flack in the world today, and I'll say, be very careful to critically read things like the Higg index and Higg MSI. There's a lot of reasons to think that agriculture should change and how we shouldn't deforest, native forests and things. And that's all true. We shouldn't do those things. But for example, the Higgs MSI doesn't do is it doesn't contemplate, whereas they'll talk a lot about the amount of water that a cotton crop uses and then not tell you that most of that water is rain. But then they don't tell you about the water that goes into a fracking operation to get natural gas to produce polyester. And they won't talk about the amount of methane that's actually leaking out of the natural gas systems around the world, such that natural gas is a huge methane emitter. People want to talk about cows, but people also forget that cows are plant-based. And they forget that when we frack for methane and you lose that methane, you don't have to lose very much methane out of the Permian Basin in Texas before the carbon footprint is worse than coal. So, and there are now satellites on planet Earth and drones going around showing that the carbon, whatever you think the carbon footprint of plastic is, it's way higher than what Higgs MSI or any of these other index says, because the fundamental data underlying the LCAs is wrong because it hasn't been updated. Toxicity, people don't know. Did you know that there's this PFAS, so these fluorinated material problems in the world? And people want to put that all in Scotchgard and Gore-Tex and things like that. And there's a certain amount of sin we should talk about there. But did you know fracking operations often use PFAS to lubricate the sludges that get pumped underground so that they do, they have lower lubricity so that they break up the rock more so that you get more natural gas. Well, guess what? There's aquifers now. In the US, there was a study done showing that there's potentially more than 100,000 sites that are been contaminated with these nasty kinds of chemistries that have to get used. Okay, so these ingredients, some of them virgin, but also to say we use recycled cotton, and there's 55 billion pounds of cotton that grows per year compared to 110 billion pounds of polyester produced per year just for the textile industry. So that is in alignment with what Sean was saying earlier. 70% of the fibers are actually polyester. And that cotton, what if you could use it a second time? So whatever you might think is the worst case for cotton, imagine what happens when you can cut all the numbers for cotton in half, because a company like NFW can make all of the world's cotton recyclable for a second use. What that does is it takes all the farms, whatever you thought was the impact of that, divides it by 2. And then when you can use it again, now you're dividing by 3. Pretty soon the impact goes down much faster than can ever be possible for the petrochemical industry. So here's our system. The system starts with sunlight, not fossil resources. And when you grow abundant natural materials, right? And I don't know if maybe I have to move this to the other side, but when you grow a natural material and you do it in an ecosystem that's regenerative, then you can produce materials, and Mirum is one, or leather-like material, but it allows you to make consumer products. And why so many brands are coming to NFW is not for just this story, but because there's really 2 stories here. One is how you can bring things back to nature. And in the case of a shoe that's all natural, a shoe that's all natural can be ground up. It doesn't even need to be composted. It can be ground up just like leaves get ground up, or leaves float away and they go away. Or when it makes economic sense, we can actually recycle these products. And by the way, this kind of system is, plays second fiddle to use the stuff that you already have. The most sustainable thing you own is the thing you already own, and it's not buying something new. So all to say, what we're working on is for all those billions of people that deserve to live like the rest of us, that also get to be consumers, we need a production system that actually produces as much or more, because as much as several billion people on planet Earth should be consuming less virgin stuff, there's also more billions of people that didn't get to consume anything the first time. So that's worth consideration. Here's some products in market. So Modher has a bag. You go to the website, get it on order today. Again, you'll see NFW on runways too, but we want to make a difference on planet Earth. We think that the only way to be sustainable is to scale. People can talk about sustainability all they want, but until billions of people can buy it, it makes no difference. So we have production models that scale to make a very large company, one of them potentially one of the more valuable companies on planet Earth. But you have to scale to be sustainable. Here's a wallet that you can buy, and this wallet is special. It has a take back program. If you get tired of this wallet, you want a different model, then we are working with Woolly to get those back, bring those up, return them to nature, and or just recycle them because our materials enable it. Profoundly different than the petrochemical model, which sells people things and then absolves all of their responsibility for what they've put into the world. NFW does not absolve ourselves of the responsibility. We work with brands on how do we get those materials back, so they're resources, and how do we get them to nature because they're resources. It means you have to do things without petrochemicals, without plastics. Here's another kind of a bag. Lena Butcher bringing this to market. Here's a car door panel. So your cars, not only the interiors, but the bumpers too. We're working with major automotive companies on making products that have order of magnitude lower carbon footprint, don't have the microfiber plastic, and that, anyway, that work and give you the experience that you want, especially for your electronic, your electric powertrains. Here's some data on a fabric that, anyway, breathes, dries quickly, and wicks the moisture away from your skin. And it's profound, and I get to wear it today. This is coming to market. Here's this shoe I showed you earlier, made with recycled cotton. So getting cotton, by the way, my shirt, 100% recycled cotton. I should have mentioned that too. All of that performance with recycled cotton, because we can give cotton a new shape by molding it, by shaping it. Okay. We were a little bit short, but I wanted to make sure we have a lot of time for questions. So I guess maybe I'll just leave you with there is a lot of hope, as Sean pointed out at the start. In fact, getting to talk to people like Sean, not just on events like this, but sometimes throughout the week, gives me a lot of hope. There's a lot of people that want to see these problems solved. So, and I would assume that anyone that's on this call right now wants to see these problems solved. But then here's the key. Here's the key. Economics. It has to work. Price and performance. So the economics of how these things work is what will change things. You could have the best intentions in the world, but if you all consider that the world's most valuable industry right now, when you total up all the money that people have saved in their 401ks in America and around the world, and you look at where are those investments tied? They're tied to petrochemicals and the petroleum gas industry. Okay, so we need to unwind that through time. We need to become less dependent on that with time. By the way, let me say one more thing. All those people that are working in those industries are not evil. They're just people with their work trying to feed their families too. Here's the thing. We need better technical approaches that scale so that as time goes forward, more people's children, there was a time when people used to have to go in the coal mine. Well, a lot of people still do go into coal mines, but the point is more and more we send robots into the coal mines. We can talk about whether we should mine coal or not, but the point is robots do more of the nasty kinds of work. Well, if we think about a better way forward, imagine a world where you're getting your resources regeneratively from an ecosystem that you live in, where the materials and the products are produced locally, where those materials are nutrients and they can go back to the planet, they can go back to the local system, and where people get to be artisans, they get to be designers, they get to collaborate with each other, they get to inspire each other with conversation and with what they do and what they share and what they can bring from a creativity perspective. That only happens when you're driving your circular system with things that are truly low energy, low impact. You can't have that kind of system if 80% of the world's population is planting trees for the other 20% that are consuming like there's no tomorrow. And by the way, if it were as simple as solving the climate problem by planting trees, I guess we'd do it. But the problem is you can't truly offset your airline flight, and you can't truly offset your plastic clothes with someone else planting trees or someone else pulling some methane out of a coal mine for you. We fundamentally have to stop doing certain kinds of technology in favor for more efficient technology. So that's what Natural Fiber Welding is working on. And we'd love to talk with many of you about helping us do it, because we need really talented people to keep doing it at big scale.
Thank you very much, all of you. Really, really insightful. Well, quite frightening, but as Sian quite rightly pointed out at the start, there is hope. So let's hope that this talk at least ignites a bit of imagination in those who are attending, and perhaps a change in the way that we're doing things. We've had a few questions come in, and Nicholas, thank you very much. You've answered a couple of them as we've been going through the talk. Luke, I'm going to start off with you, because there is a question here from someone who's actually not named themselves, but just around vegan leather. So just a comment about, there's been quite a lot of backlash against vegan leather, using plastic.
Yeah.
But actually, what leather are you using? Obviously, it's plant-based, but where does the leather come from?
Yeah. So let's talk about leather just for a moment. First of all, no one grows a cow for its hide. Statistically speaking, I don't know, maybe sometime once someone did, but no one grows a cow for its hide. Cows use cellulose and lignocellulose to grow, by the way, biogenic, which makes their methane very different than the methane that comes from a fracking operation. We do not, so Natural Fiber Welding doesn't make leather out of hides. There's other people that do that, and that's the leather we know and that people have used for thousands, tens of thousands of years, etc. Although the modern leather, of course, is made differently. And then along came people who said, hey, I prefer not to get my leather-like material from an animal. That's fine. Like that's totally an appropriate thing to perhaps think for yourself. But what happened is the petroleum industry started producing polyurethane and mixtures of polyurethane plus polyester. And so people came along and they said, well, how do we market this to people? Well, they came up with this term that, well, it's called leather. And I'll just say, when you really dig in and you look at what fracking operations and what oil rigs, when they explode in the Gulf of Mexico, and you think about pipeline, I don't, and in fact, I don't know, like if I told you I was a vegan, then you'd say, well, Luke doesn't eat plastic, he eats plants or something like that. So so people are using polyurethane, polyester. Okay. And then people have the bright idea, well, I know how to market this even one step better. Let's take out a little bit of the polyester and let's put in cactus fiber, or let's put in pineapple fiber, or let's put in fruit or apple skins or grape skins. And okay, the problem is the working binder is polyurethane. And then I'll say the performance suffers as a result. So you got a lot of people who say cactus leather, they say whatever, it's polyurethane. And then you have people nowadays saying, well, let's grow mycelium and mushrooms, and it's a great story. The problem is it doesn't work. And they have to use polyurethanes and coatings and things. Again, it's just biomass plus polyurethane. Here's how NFW is different. We don't use any of the petrochemical binders, none of the synthetics, and there's no polyurethane. We have literally discovered a set of recipes to be able to take natural fiber and to be able to take things like veggie oil and be able to bake with them to make a leather-like material that when you need it to do 500,000 Bailey flexes for a performance shoe on the trail, anyway, it does 1 million. And when you need extra elongation that you can't get out of leather for the automotive industry, for making car parts, anyway, we can engineer it to have more elongation so that the construction and the manufacture of those auto parts is more simple and less wasteful to do. So we have a 100% natural approach that makes us categorically unique on planet Earth. And then I'll say that makes us, in my opinion, truly vegan, although I'll just say not everyone on planet Earth is vegan. So you don't see NFW necessarily marketing itself as vegan. We'll let the brands that use our products, if they're a vegan brand, then they'll be able to happily call their product vegan. But then for those people that might decide that they want to use Mirum as a complement to leather, anyway, I'm not going to tell those people that they shouldn't buy our Mirum and make a construction and a design that they want to see. So Mirum's the only truly, in my opinion, vegan thing on the market. And it's fundamentally different than people who mix biomass with polyurethane or make polyurethane, or anyway, then there's people who take the hides of a cow.
From my experience, it is this is super important what Luke is developing now, and I have to see it with my own eyes to believe you, Luke, because everything we have seen on the market until now and everything that is told to us is confusion, is very confusing, and people and you students, you have no possibility to understand what is right, what is wrong, what is PLA, what is polysaccharide, what is PU. But basically from our understanding, and that's why we turn to this 100% natural fiber alternative, is that we don't dare even using lyocell at this stage because we are not 100% certain that this is safe enough. But if Luke comes with that, and I think lensing with lyocell is that far also, then yes, of course, we should use these industrial possibilities and scaling up also possibilities, because this is the future of the textiles. The problem is what the industry is contributing to this confusion and to contribute to just let people unknown. I know hundreds of or dozens, let's say, of textile developers, product developers, buyers, sourcers. They have no clue about what it really is. What is a vegan leather? They think it's fun. It's a Pinatex. It comes from a pineapple. It's wrong. It is a PLA. At best, it's a polysaccharide. But both will never disappear once in the water. They may compost in an industrial compost under certain temperatures, humidity, time parameters. But this is in an industrial compost. In your own home compost, they will never dematerialize, and in the water, they will never disappear. This is proven. So it's very difficult to make to distinguish the good and the wrong. I think Luke is the first that I heard from my experience who really brings a new approach on this, and I guess that's why he's backed up by the industry so massively.
Yeah, thank you all. Very interesting, and I think probably what we're hearing is that actually it is really complex, but it's a question of actually understanding and knowing, and asking questions about, actually, really where does this particular material come from? And actually Aditi has asked the question here about, where can we find out more information about chemical uses within the fashion industry? How can we be sure that the fabrics we're using are, in effect, kind to the planet rather than, evil plastics and other things we've been discussing?
Can I ask this? Within the schools there in London, is there a requirement of taking chemistry?
No, there is not.
So here's the thing. It is complex, and we live in a modern world where the way your computer works and the ways to program a computer. And if you want to really know things about like internet security and how private can you keep your information, you got to know deep things about how the internet works and technologies that are available. And I'll say, if you really want to know where and what's behind these different materials, whether it's Gore-Tex or anything, or natural fiber welding things, by the way, come to our website. We transparently show people what we're doing and what we're about. But the point is, you got to know some chemistry. And there's a lot of people that right now there's confusion around even the use of the word bio. Like people are saying, well, bioplastic, and I'll say, Well, some of the bioplastics are actually on balance good. And actually, I want to use some of the bioplastics in our pantry to make new things. But there's some bioplastics that are not good, not at all. And in fact, they have as high of a carbon footprint as conventional plastic. They just get the bio put in front. And because they get the bio put in front, all of a sudden people want to believe it's better. Well, guess what? You got to know the chemical differences. So it doesn't mean you have to be a chemist. It means you have to understand the language, and you have to be able to critically assess some of the fundamentals behind. So I'd say, if you really want to know, if you really care, you don't need to be a chemist. You don't need to know everything about the periodic table. You do need to have a certain willingness to engage with a technical depth, so you understand the difference between different polymers, and how just by putting the word bio in front of something or putting the word vegan in front of something doesn't automatically make it better.
And if this is too complicated, just wear wool and cotton, that works.
Yeah, well, and natural materials, especially when people can, the thing about natural materials is we all know kind of where they come from. They grow or something. All right, then it comes down to, was the supply chain ethical? That's a solvable problem. I mean, you can go to Nicholas, you can go to Mover right now, and you can find documentation that they use an ethical supply chain. So what's better than that? I don't know. Maybe someday when maybe we can get Nicholas more materials or something to use. But the truth is, the thing about nature is it grows above the ground. You can see what's going on. There's a lot of these fossil resource derived things where it's very opaque, because literally it's hidden under the ground, it's hidden away, it's off emitting somewhere out in the Gulf of Mexico. And then it goes to these big giant refineries that you can't get within a mile of it because, well, it's dangerous and toxic. And, there's a bunch of reasons why we kind of like this, it's just that stuff that's out there. Well, you got to know what's going on if you really want to. You have to define the problem to develop the right solution. If you don't find it, you don't have a chance.
And you've got to ask the questions. I just want to add one thing, because I see that there's something in the Q&A about compostables. And I just want to have a little warning to everybody who thinks making compostable clothing, and particularly compostable trainers, is an answer, when we do a lot of work with the entire, where does something come from, how is it used, and what is its end of life at a plastic planet. And we've just done a big report all about what is the right time to use a compostable material. And it drives me nuts when I see people saying, oh, we need compostable trainers. Trust me, the food waste stream is not a packaging waste stream. It's not a clothing waste stream. And it's definitely not a waste stream that wants to take some of the 160 billion pairs of trainers that we pump out every single year. So this whole thing of compostable clothing is a real red herring, because if it needs industrially composting, no industrial composter wants it, because it's a food waste stream. We don't actually want to be composting trainers down to plow back into the soil, which is why for me, when Luke talks about nutrients that do not need that kind of end of life mechanical or chemical processing, that can be chopped up and can go back to the planet as nutrients, that's a light bulb moment for me, because it's redefined, it's reframed something with a new language. We're not talking about biomaterials. We're talking about taking nutrients from the planet, giving them back as nutrients without all of those chemical processes that need to happen. So beware of compostables.
Thank you very much, all of you. I'm very conscious of the time, and we do have a few questions that weren't answered, but I think Luke and Nicholas and Sian, just with your concluding comments, I think most of the questions have been covered. So thank you all very much. Tip of the iceberg, I feel. We've got to go away and do lots of research, and maybe should you have any future talks coming up, then perhaps you could communicate with us and I can circulate that across the school, because I feel there is a real kind of interest in wanting to know more, and really trying to sort of, although it might be small steps, make some change in some way or another. So thank you all very, very much. The talk has been recorded and it will be available not immediately, but as we move into December on the Fashion Business School webpage. So thank you all very much. Yeah, really grateful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you to everybody. Bye.